Welcome everyone, a guy trying here, and today I've got something very different for you. I'm actually going to have an interview with the 2v2 tournament winners at PAX Unplugged, and these guys are actually my local, so I'm very excited to talk to them today and share a conversation with you. So let's get into it. Chris and JJ of Team Good Rectangles, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Now, I know you all. As I said, you guys come to my store. I've known you before we started playing Altered, but the audience doesn't. So, can you give us a little background in your background in TCGs and what led you to Altered?
Sure. I've been playing TCGs in some form or another since I was 11. We won't talk about exactly how many years that is, but just know it's upwards of 2 decades. I started with Magic the Gathering, but I have played just about every card game that has come out since the late 1990s in some capacity or another. So I've hit the big three. I've played Naruto. Most recently, I've been into Flesh and Blood, which is actually how we met. And then, of course, Altered.
And Chris, what about you?
Ladies and gentlemen, the champs are here. Hi, I'm Chris. I've been playing TCGs for not as long as JJ, but for a while now, since I was like 12, 13. Got my start really in the competitive scene playing professional Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes, that is a thing. I was a top 50 player for a season or two as my accolade. Very big also in the Magic the Gathering competitive scene, and now really putting forth my effort into Altered. So thank you for having us, by the way.
And is it true that there was actually a rule change in Yu-Gi-Oh because of you?
Yes, they did not have a rule for a thing that I did in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is intentionally timed. And so after a competitive tournament, they kicked me out, banned me, and then made the rule because in Yu-Gi-Oh, winning the tournament, winning a round is 7 points, losing is 3, tying is 1. One tying is worse than losing. So I went to a competitive REL style tournament. I already had my national invite and would tie on purpose with people I did not want to face later on. And so that was considered unsportsmanlike. They didn't have a rule or anything for that. Kicked me from the tournament and then made the rule afterwards, which is wild. So I think I still have 96 years to go in my ban.
Now, 2v2 is an interesting beast in Altered. I think, multiplayer in any game is a difficult challenge in any card game. What drove you both to 2v2 and what made you choose your heroes Akesha and Kojo?
So initially, when we heard about 2v2 as a format, we're really interested in two rules. The first and most important one is how you win. You don't need to have both teammates that have their heroes and companions meet. You just need one of the two teammates to do that or achieve victory with Lyra Festival. Well, which is important because it came up in top 4. And the second is that if you have cards or effects that say target expedition or choose a player, those kinds of effects can target your teammate. So initially we were thinking that a strong strategy would be for one person to focus hardcore on advancing their expeditions and the other person to focus hardcore on supporting them and kind of controlling the opponent. So that landed us on red and purple. And then to narrow that down even further, we landed on Kojo and Akesha because both of them have, when you have the first player token effects, those trigger when your opponent has the first player token in multiplayer as well. So it fit right in what we thought would be powerful to do in 2v2, and that's why we landed on those two.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with JJ in that accord. Mostly because, especially with our two heroes, it's more of like an on-off cycle where we both have our abilities and then we both don't. And we don't really care that much when our abilities are off, but it gives us an extreme advantage when they both are on. So every full cycle round, we get this twice, right? Because it doesn't care if it's I'm first player or JG is first player, we both get that action.
Now, it's interesting to hear you say that you landed on red and purple because our locals has been very interested in 2v2, and in fact, 3 out of the top 4 teams at the PAX Unplugged tournament were from our locals, and all 3 of you were on Akesha plus Red Hero. In fact, one Atsadi and Surge, one Basira and Kaizaimon, and of course you on Kojo and Buddha. Do you think that that puts you ahead of the other 2 Red Heroes, and were you looking at the other 2 Red Heroes before you landed on Kojo?
Actually, even though I am the purple player, I will take that first because we've discussed that at length. We did test other heroes in the purple X kind of matchup, right? Or the pairing of purple X. And we figured out mostly anytime, JG, for example, was getting +1 counters or whatever the motif may be for that, going wide, super wide with other decks, it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't pairing out. There was just too much removal from the opponent's side to be able to really do anything. So it was really heavily reliant on, being able to trigger your ability and be able to have perfect game sense. When I say about that, I mean perfect cards at perfect time. And that's not how Altered or any TCG works. Because if you have perfect hands at perfect times, then the game's work. AKA, look at Robin. Look at how quickly Robin Hood got nerfed. Because perfect game at perfect times. But when you're running Kojo, it is still a 2/2/2 that you have to deal with, right? So if you're playing, versus purple, right, the purple player still has to deal with a 2/2/2 on that side that will advance for free, even if they have removal. So it feels bad for them to use Off You Go or use removal to get rid of Kojo. And we count on that almost every game. JJ?
The very first game of 2v2 I ever played was actually not with Chris. It was with one of the other people who wound up in the top 4, Ethan. And I had just played my 1v1 Atsadi deck because I was like, Atsadi really likes playing big bodies. And my focus was on gigantic cards. Thought that could be pretty powerful in 2v2. He played Akesha. And we played about 5 games and didn't lose a single one. So we were like, okay, this kind of red advancement strategy with purple playing the assist role seems pretty effective in 2v2. So we both took our notes from those 5 games and went back to our respective partners, me with Chris and him with John, and we built the same pairing initially, which was Akesha and Atsadi. And then we play tested with the other team from our store that made it into the top 4, Kyle and Lindsay, and they were playing Bashira and Alphanis.
Yeah.
Yep. And we didn't win a single time. We got absolutely floored. We discovered some weaknesses in the all-in gigantic plan, which is if they deal with the gigantic creature, then you're tapped out and your turn's over, and you're the guy who's supposed to be advancing. So it was a lesson to learn very early on in 2v2 that we needed to diversify and make sure that we weren't just putting all of our eggs into a single basket. And so we landed on Kojo without changing the deck at all, just because every other turn I would get the 2/2/2, and Atsadi's ability is effectively tap out for the turn, draw a card. So we decided that each Atsadi trigger was worth drawing a card that I couldn't use, or in the case of switching to Kojo, that card I couldn't use I got for free. So that was how we kind of started the transition, and then we realized that we were happiest when I was more of a mid-range ramp deck, where I had powerful cards such as Aja, which I think might be my favorite card from the first set after playing this tournament. Aja, Mighty Jin, Sun Wukong, just having these mid-range threats that are as scary as those big ramp targets at the end, but are very resilient and allow me to flex my plays where I could play a Ratataskar, play a Helping Hand, and get some extra value going without just always tapping out.
You said, JJ, that your first game in 2v2 was with a 1v1 deck. How do you think 2v2 decks differ from 1v1 decks? Are there cards that are not great in 1v1 that are amazing in 2v2 and vice versa?
Yeah, so there are cards that shine in 2v2 that I think are less attractive in 1v1 format. So initially, my Atsadi structure was to ramp into big gigantic targets. In 1v1, you can die. You're sacrificing the early game to play your ramp cards, and you have no support, and your opponent is free to double advance in their expeditions. So it's sort of a risky gambit where you're hoping the ramp pays off and then you can catch up at the on the opposite end. In 2v2, you have a whole nother player who's helping you out. So while I was sacrificing those turns making the ramp plays, we were hoping that the second player's deck being full interaction would be able to stave off sort of the downside for playing the ramp strategy. Additionally, there are a few cards, most of which wound up in Chris's deck, so I'll let him talk about them. But there are a few cards that really shine in 2v2 because they say target expedition. There are a total of 8 expeditions that you can target in 2v2, as opposed to 4. There's twice as many. And if you are playing something that generates a positive effect, targeting your teammates' expedition can help, again, reduce those negative drawbacks to playing a ramp strategy. So, Chris, if you want to talk about those cards.
Yeah, I do have to give JJ credit. Some of these were okay. I should really say most of these were his finds. The first one I want to kind of mention is Thoth at Rare is insane because it says target expedition gets 2 1/1s. So spoiler alert, I'm never getting the 1/1s. I can send them off to JJ. So having a Kojo and 2 1/1s I can place in the other expedition, it's really difficult for the opponent to use, even in best case scenario, to do, I don't know, Kraken's Wrath, right? That's still for 0, getting rid of 3 targets, but we got those targets for free, so JJ could still play, right? Being in purple and red, running Saku the Demon in both colors to the point where in semis, I forgot that was a thing. We built the decks together. I know the deck lists, and it came out. I looked at him like he was cheating. Small Step Giant Leap, Target Expedition, our win condition, to the point where I developed code words to use across the table to let him know that I had it in hand. Hey, you get all these free advances, and when it actually counts, we'll win mid-turn. So even if it goes to a tie, we still win because we win. We advance mid-turn. So all those landmarks that say in blue, move your expedition on the beginning of the next step, it doesn't really matter because we are winning the previous turn in mid-game. So a lot of those finds, I really have to give it up to JJ because he found most of them and was like, why aren't we running this? And I looked at him and went, I don't know why we're not running this. I think this is worth a rare slot. Yes, I won't be able to do XYZ cool thing, but it's better to have options than be locked in.
You mentioned that you had code words for Small Step Giant Leap, and there was a large discussion in the Discord about how codes and different languages can be utilized during 2v2. And in fact, most of the teams in the 2v2 tournament at PAX Unplugged had some sort of code, or one team even used hand symbols. Can you let us in on any of the secrets behind your code, what you were using to discuss during the game?
I'll let JJ go first.
So I have to say that I drank the haterade when it came to the code words that he was talking about. I think I had incorrectly, I have to eat crow here, I incorrectly assumed that people would be able to suss out what your code meant immediately after you playing a card. I think my favorite code that we encountered, Chris and I understood immediately, which is we played some guys that said, can you two-step? The guy was like, what, like Texas? And what they were trying to confirm was that they were playing a pairing of purple and pink, so Ysmir and Lyra, because Small Step Giant Leap is color shifted into Lyra. So they were both playing Small Step Giant Leap, and the key word there is step, so they were trying to double advance to win the game. So I was like, okay, most of these codes are pretty decipherable, but ours was a little more unorthodox, and it did actually fool our finals opponents, which was pretty beneficial. So okay, Chris, you can share what they were.
Sure. So I have a surprise hobby, which is I've been a sleight of hand magician for about 20 years. So in sleight of hand, there's something called a coded act, where you're able to relay secret information in normal speech, right? I won't go too much into it yet again, but shout outs to any magicians watching. Shout out Morgan and West. I basically stole their coding act and used it towards TCG. So very quickly before the match, before we started, I shared to JJ some of these code words I would use to be able to relay secret information. So, for example, Texas two-step, not really layered. If you know your matchup, okay, 2-step, purple, pink, 2 small steps. Done. Our codes were at least 2 layers deep. For example, I would say to JJ in the middle of match of, I have body wash. That means nothing. To the point where we had opponents look at me specifically like I was an insane person. Which is right, but not the point. Right? I told JJ ahead of time, I'm like, hey, if I have removal, right, of the important thing, that includes landmark destruction, feature destruction, whatever it may be, I will tell you that I'm going to clean the board. Clean, one way to clean yourself is with body wash. So if I say I have body wash, it means I have removal, right? I told him, obviously, that if I say I have the thing, that means I have small step giant leap, because that is the point of playing purple, is to be able to move and advance him. So if I say I have the thing, I have giant leap, to the point where that confused our finals opponent. They guessed conveniently I had the card that they thought of, which is my unique Femel, which lets me effectively draw 3 cards, which is nutty. They guessed that, but when I with the other card in hand, I had 2 cards in hand. One was the unique Femel, and one was step. And so I said, "Oh, I have the thing." And they went, "Oh, he has Femel." Well, I'm going to play my Femel to make them think I'm right, with the code name, with the code words we're using, and then I'll play small step giant leap, and they'll have no idea I have it. To the point where we almost played out that last round until I went, I have small step because we're locals, and they went, cool, it's over, right? So in 2v2, code is only as good as you can basically decrypt it and encrypt it. The reason I state this is because we were facing in the semis a really nice French duo that came from Canada from this tournament, spoke fluent French. And so they did all their talk in French. The bad news for them was I learned 2 years of French in college, which helped a lot. So it doesn't matter that you speak French. If I can understand a bit of your French, then you're telling me your plays for the next turn in advance. So I know what to keep. So code is only as good as encryption and decryption of it.
Both of you were playing heroes that have an effect when you are first player, or in 2v2 when your partner is first player. And in TCGs, there's often a huge advantage in most games to the player who goes first. Does the day back and forth cycle help alleviate that first player advantage?
So from my perspective, I would say that it really depends on what strategy your opponent has brought to the table. I find that Altered is a game where the major mechanic of the game is trying to layer your plays with a lot of what we have all commonly referred to as after you cards, like 1-drops that are just in our deck so that we can effectively put the onus on our opponent to make their big play for the turn before we have to, while you don't have enough mana, for example, to do more than one play, because then they know exactly what your play is for the turn, and then they can respond to it. In 2v2, since we adopted a strategy of one person playing aggression and one person playing control, as long as I went before Chris, he knew how to respond to the opponents. So it didn't matter if I actually had the first player token, but as long as me or the opponent that was in between me and Chris to my right and Chris's left, if either one of us went first, that was the preferred scenario for us. Given the fact that we were both playing heroes that have effects that trigger when one of us has the first player token, we get it every other turn. Once the turn cycle starts, even if we didn't get it on the very first turn of the game, found that we got the same amount of value over the average number of turns. So we really didn't mind as long as Chris wasn't the person who got the first player token.
Yeah, I really can't say too much in addition. The only thing I would say is I 100% agree. If it was basically me, if it goes in a clockwise circle, it's me, the opponent, JJ, right? As long as one of us went first, even if I went first, I don't really care because I'm going to be playing after you, or I'm going to play my 1-drop after you, right? With anything that's basically 1-drop, I'm going to draw a card, I'm going to kind of skip my turn without being out of the round, right? So out of a die roll, right, of whose turn it is, 3 of the 4 times I'm fine with that. Especially if I'm going first and I see it coming, I'm going to be keeping a lot of these 1-drop after use purpose and I draw, right? Specifically for that turn, be able to do that and skip my turn, right? So even I think JD can probably agree. A majority of the rounds that we started, the first action of just dropping our 3, every single match we did, I was the last one to drop my 3, and I probably spent like 2 or 3 minutes looking over all 6 cards to decide for every match, because that is so important to know who's going first and then decide which of the 3 that you're keeping. Because if I know if they won the die roll and I'm going next, I may keep a 3rd card that is basically just an after you, specifically for my next action the following turn. So not only is it just, turn order and planning ahead, it is also, okay, I know this is coming. What are my options to deal with?
As we said earlier, there were 3 out of the top 4 were Akesha plus Red Hero. So obviously it seems that players think that this combo is very strong. What matchups were you worried about? Was there any particular heroes or strategies that you thought might counter you?
I'm going to go first because I know Jason is going to say a lot about this, because I was so worried about Double Lyra Festival weeks in advance, to the point where I would bother JJ during normal God-fearing hours where he's doing other things that are not altered and messaging me like, listen, we got to figure this out. It's going to be Purple X, Double Lyra. So I pestered JJ to essence. I'm like, we got to make sure we have options for it. And so I'm going to leave it to JJ.
So just to cover all bases, we initially entered into sort of this idea of, okay, so we're happy with what our decks look like. What other strategies could people bring to the table? What do we think could be something that people decided were good for 2v2? Everybody in our playtest group, which included the other 2 teams in the top 4, we all identified Double Lyra Festival as a strategy that people would put together because it's the only alternate win condition available in Altered right now. And also, you don't have to have put a lot of testing into 2v2 to achieve a win with Lyra Festival. You could play Lyra Festival in 1v1, and that deck can carry over into 2v2 just as well, because if you achieve your win condition, it doesn't matter how many players there are, you win the game. So we were worried that a lot of people were not going to have as much time to prepare for 2v2 as we were putting into it. So we were like, oh, there's going to be several people playing Lyra Festival. But also we were worried at the beginning of our playtesting about double Waru, because Robin Hood wasn't errated yet. So we were like, oh man, this sort of control pass my turn with magical training and other 1-drops is going to be really hard if there are 4 Robin Hoods in play. So we were thankful to hear about the errata, and that kind of eased our worries about that matchup. But as a whole, in 1v1, Sigismaris and Waru and just those 2 were really sort of doing very well. And so we were thinking, oh, if people have those decks together for 1v1, that they might just play them in 2v2 because that's just the deck they have that's the most competitive. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, playing a ramp strategy, we were really worried about double advance aggro strategies. So what happened is my red deck sort of took on this mid-range ramp role where I had threats at lower value and then still had a few of premium top-end ramp threats. And then of the other 2 who had the same Akesha plus red hero, we had one that was a more aggressively slanted red hero, Bashira, and then our finals opponents were the full ramp strategy, and we're playing Etsadi. So we kind of had all 3 different flavors of red, even not just different heroes, different strategies were also shown. So in our playtesting, we really got to get a good feel for how we wanted to respond to all of the things we were worried about. And ultimately, we found that our core game plan was pretty successful into any combination of the standard, I'm just going to try and advance decks. So our first round opponents were playing Ben and Crowbar and Sigismaris, and we didn't have too much difficulty with that matchup. That kind of put our theories at ease, because this was the first 2v2, right? So it was all theory crafting until we sat down and started playing. And then that first matchup, Chris and I both looked at each other and we were like, okay, I think we kind of hit the bullseye with this one. So let's see how the next round goes. And, all of that testing and all of that preparation was really worth it. So we correctly identified some of the spookier strategies, and I think we prepared for them pretty well. Lyra Festival in particular, aside from letting them go for it and just removing the festival after they've achieved the condition, which is something that everybody can do, we had intentionally included a card in Chris's deck that I think wasn't on a lot of people's radar, which was Lady in the Lake Rare. And after the tournament, Chris could not stop thanking me for forcing him to play that card.
I'll interject here. And he said he was a hater and drinking the Kool-Aid previously. No, I fought with JJ about Rare Lady of the Lake probably for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was like, this is a waste of a rare slot. I'm never gonna use this, right? And during our playtest, and shout outs to our locals, I found, I'm like, wait a minute, there are scenarios that I can use this, and I need dudes, right? It's very hard to play and try to block off a advancing player on the opponent's side when you don't have dudes, right? You can have removal, but you sometimes just need dudes. So I said, fine, we'll try it out. And it was like a last minute addition. And then every single time that I had Lady of the Lake, I could use it to dramatic, like impactful plays, right? To the point where I got to play Small Step Giant Leap, use Lady of the Lake to make it lose fleeting, and then play it again on the same turn. It was nuts, right? So, and to kind of double back a little bit as well as my final comment. If you don't think that pink is scary, especially pink or green with Lyra Festival, look at a guy trying. He won his tournament with that PAX. So like it's really, and not to poo-poo on anyone, but what players are really bad at is threat assessment. Sometimes it's worth them having the good thing so you can remove the better thing. And that's what I'll say with that.
Thank you for the shout out. Now,
baby.
now, in most games, multiplayer or 2v2 is mainly a side event. And Justin, head of organized play for Equinox, has said that if there is going to be a 2v2 sort of scene, it will have to be fostered by the community because they are focused on 1v1. Do you think that there's a place for 2v2 to have a competitive scene? Or do you think it'll sort of be put aside as a side event for the most part?
Oh, no. I have to be pretty aggressive here and try and say absolutely not. I think this will be a thing. Only because I remember at the beginning games of Magic Gathering, they're like, oh, this Commander Highlander thing is never going to be a thing, right? It's a thing that, back in the days when I was judging, people were like, oh, this is the thing that you guys play. Like, you judges play to pass time between rounds. And I'm like, no, this is fun. It's a good way to get rid of, singles. It's a way to keep things fresh. It helps you learn how to play the game. So I don't think it's going to go away, but it's going to be solely dependent on us as a community. And especially when we're having cards that come out that say target expedition instead of your expedition or whatever it may be. And these cards that have versatility, it's really up to the printing of cards that have versatility versus the community that wants to foster this environment, right? Look to bring, not to bring sour grapes into the conversation, but look at the big outrage there was with Commander and the ban list like 2 or 3 months ago because of one rule change, right? So I can't say it's just community based. It's going to be also based on Equinox being able to go, hey, instead of saying target, let's make, instead of me saying your or each or whatever it may be, let's leave it in target because we know there are 2v2 players out there.
Yeah, I would say I appreciate their dedication to building up organized play in any capacity, because when the game initially released, they were pretty tenuous about how they were going to tackle organized play. People really enjoy multiple different opportunities to play their game, and even if you are designing cards with a specific interaction in mind, sometimes that interaction or place that card shines happens in a different format or a different way to play. So, for example, we have limited environments where we can draft in sealed and altered, and there are cards that are very good in those formats that don't really get to see play in 1v1. So I wouldn't hard rule out an additional format, but the focus is good for them to bolster the organized play however they can. And if it falls on the community to kind of keep the 2v2 format alive, I don't think we're going to struggle with that. Anybody who participated in this event said it was easily the best event they have ever played in, and that they can't wait for more 2v2. So I think
I have
that
to also chime in at our semifinal round. The two French guys said they specifically drove one way 8 hours plus to PAX Unplugged specifically for this event, right? Because that's how fun it was for them. They're like, yes, it's competitive and we like the competitive environment because we're competitive TCG players, but we really came because it's fun. And this is the only time we're going to be able to play 2v2 for a while.
And I believe two of the judges who were interviewed after PAX said that they were worried that 2v2 wasn't going to have the numbers to effectively run a tournament, but it ended up being the most populated tournament that weekend. So obviously there is a following for this format.
yeah, and we were all having a good time. Of course, anytime you're doing something competitive, it is more exciting to win than lose. But everybody's spirits were high, and they were just all so excited to see the cool interactions between the cards and the ideas that people came up with. Some of them were very, very innovative. There was really a really diverse field.
We had mentioned earlier the quick errata of Robin Hood. And since then, there's been a lot of conversations in both 1v1 and 2v2 about a card you guys have mentioned quite a bit, Small Step, Giant Leap. What do you think about that card's place in the meta, and do you think it's too powerful, or do you think it's the fact that it's a 6 cost that's a brick until you win the game with it is enough of a balance to keep it from overwhelming the game?
So it's interesting, right? Because as you had mentioned, the card does nothing until it wins you the game. We had actually included Lady in the Lake in our deck to give it the opportunity to do that one turn earlier kind of thing, being able to double cast it because naturally it has fleeting, so most people are waiting until they're one space away. Or if they're one space away this turn and they have something that's anchored that is very likely to win them the game next turn. Either way, it kind of has that role fulfillment of closing a game out. And so you could look at it like it's an alternate win con almost, because it wins you the game before you actually check for the normal win condition in the game. So if people are kind of zeroing in on it as a card that could break the typical format of the game, I could see that as being a potential problem. But in that case, you would also have to look at elephant in the room, which is Lyra Festival, the only other alternate win condition in the game, which can win the game sometimes. And I have experienced this in 1v1 where they played it on turn 2, untapped for turn 3, and I didn't have any removal, and they won on turn 3 of the game. So Small Step, Giant Leap, Lyra Festival, which condition do you think is more difficult to achieve? Playing the game naturally and advancing to being one spot away from victory, or playing 3 creatures with 3 different status effects? I think that both kind of have, maybe that's like the hidden cost that people aren't considering, is that you still have to get to the position where Small Step wins you the game. So you were playing a normal game of Altered, and that condition all the way up into then, not just the mana cost of Small Step, Giant Leap, you also still had to win all of those advancements. So I think, for me personally, I'm not certain that it is to the level of errata worthy.
I'm going to agree. Also, give you some clickbait, the spicy take, right? I think the same people complaining about that it's too broken just don't understand A, threat assessment, or B, mechanic, right? Because those same people who even they're like, oh, I play a lot of purple, so I still think it's broken. I'm like, you don't think that playing a huge demon that basically says your opponent's previous turn does not matter is okay, right? That you can just play and you get a dude, right? Is okay. But me saying perfect condition, I have the card is not okay. Those same people, right, don't look at the previous turns where purple players normally just go, okay, I lose. Okay, I use my removal and I time walk myself. I skip my turn, right? There is a cost. It's not immediate. It's probably not even just on the card, but everything has a cost. For example, if you're going to play Lives Festival, normally you're going to have to skip your turn to play. You have to quote unquote time walk yourself to play it. To the point where during matches, during the TCG tournament, I literally said out loud, okay, for my turn, I'm time walking myself, right? Because I would play something that would skip my turn to be able to do something, right? Get rid of land, get rid of target creature, right? I would say, okay, I was going to do something cool, like draw a bunch of cards or whatever it may be, but instead, I have to time walk myself to be able to give my teammate the opportunity to win, right? So it's threat assessment and not understanding what cards do. I know it's a Magic the Gathering turn, but reading the card explains the card, right? If you're like, well, it's good because it's your advance. I'm like, okay, if you are, it has fleeting, so you can only use it once to build other cards and make it not fleeting. And if you run it at rare, it's still a rare slot for no additional benefit except for it loses fleeting. So you're still running other things to deal with that because it's still a 60 drop. So you're like, okay, I need to make it cheaper, so I need to put a bunch of cards in my deck now that have to make it cheaper because that's my win con. And to the point where we've tested a version of Purple for Purple X where all I did was nothing. I literally stall out so I can play the 8-drop landmark and play spells for free. And I would get to 12, 13, 14 down and still lose. So if Small Step Giant Leap or Lyra Festival or whatever card it may be is the problem, then why in purple am I getting to 12, 13, 14 mana and being able to play spells for free that lose fleeting and still losing hard?
We're in the middle of spoiler season right now for Trial by Frost that comes out at the end of the month. JJ, I know that you are avoiding spoilers for the most part, and Chris, you are casually looking at them, it seems.
I'm stepping them up like water, baby.
Okay, great. But without necessarily going into any of the spoilers that have already been shown, what is something you're hoping for about Trial by Frost? And then, if you want, about Altered in 2025.
So I think thing number one for me for Altered 2025 is an announcement from the organized play team that gives a structured environment for people to look forward to. The initial reservation about organized play was that they wanted this game to be more casual friendly and they wanted people to engage with it and not feel like the only reason that people are playing their game is for prizes. But I think that the community has shown to itself and to the company that they are engaging with their game. They love the art, they love the mechanics, and just like what we're missing most of all is more opportunities to engage with it. And so for Altered as a whole, I hope we get a defined organized play schedule beyond just a weekly play that exists right now. And then as far as from Trial by Frost, we've gotten a few spoilers for some cool mechanics. And unfortunately, as I try to live spoiler free, woe is me, I got to win an event and receive a spoiler card. So what I will say that I'm most looking forward to in Trial by Frost is lifting up some of the heroes who are in the shadows right now that have strategies that aren't quite completely fleshed out. So I want to see some Golrang support. I want to see some Lindaway support. I want to see some Rin and Orchid support outside of the already immeasurably powerful Lyra Festival deck that a guy trying successfully took down a 1v1 tournament with. But just lifting up some of those strategies so that they become playable, because there's nothing worse than your favorite hero sitting in the darkness, not receiving the support, and wanting to play a hero that really synchronizes with what you want to do in the game, but you just don't have the capability to do so.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for me, when I want to see throughout, let's just start with Trial by Frost. I want to see the greedy version of me is more snow things. I want to see my heroes and my things in snow. Kusmana Kwanzaa stuff. That's the greedy version of me that I want. I want more snow things on skis, things on snowboards. You know, that the competitive player in me. Yeah, I want to see some support for some of these decks that I love that I basically cannot play at locals, and that's sad. Like, I want to play a really good die roll deck that's not just like actual blowout or don't get to do anything. Some kind of mid-range die roll deck I would love. As a guy trying, and JJ very much know, I want to make Buddha good. That is not the case right now. If you look at the AWOL tournaments every week, barely makes top. If it makes top 8, barely makes top 8, and then loses right after. Right. And I think that's sad. For myself, for 2025, I would agree. I think the most important thing for me is some kind of structured, organized play. Even if I'm not involved in it, I still want to be able to go to nationals.
Really, what we want is for a guy trying to be able to shoutcast organized altered events.
Let's go. That's it. You know what? They got it. You know, and then no proof. Yeah, I want to be able to go to these branded events, right? The Flesh and Blood, I think they call it callings. The Channel Fireball tournament, Ask Things, and Magic the Gathering, and Star City Games. I want to see more of these type of things. So it's really hard to foster an environment of people when there's only Discord and maybe locals. Honestly, I've been seeing throughout I'm pretty active in the Discord at this point. I have seen multiple people, basically multiple groups, stating that like they're jealous of our locals having an average of 8, and I think that's sad, right? If the only time that we can really interact as a community is online, I think there needs to be a physical, at least once a year, a physical place where I could be like, oh, here's that guy I was talking to online. Let's play some games, hang out, get a drink, whatever it may be, to have some kind of organized play final thing at the end of the year, or some place to meet up halfway, right, to see progress and help each other out.
Yeah, and we do have Board Game Arena, which is great for being able to test 1v1 decks, although 2v2 is not implemented into it in any way, and I don't think that there's any plans to. But being able to play with your own uniques in a game like this is I'm very surprised that they were able to do that. And they have said that there is going to be some sort of major world tournament in 2025, but we haven't gotten any news aside from that. So it's kind of like, that's great to hear, but
right,
when? And when?
I mean, not to be that guy, especially as a marketing guy, it doesn't matter until it's actually implemented. It's proof in pudding. I have played multiple TCGs where they go, "We have the cool thing. We'll do the cool thing," and then a year later the game dies, and I go, "Where was the cool thing?" Right? I understand there's issues with anything with implementation, right? But we're promised print and play on release. It's now January now. I know they're starting beta opens, things like that, but don't hang the carrot in front of me and then expect me to chase it forever, right? There's some reasonable accountability that needs to be taken as well, right? But I understand like there's problems, things happen, but don't dangle the carrot in front of me forever and expect me to wait.
How much of you said you want to make Buddha good. How much of that is just because you want to show off your original art signed promo?
Yep, spite, 100%. It is. I am a awful human being, and the only reason I want to make it good is because I have a. No, I mean, yes, it's mostly because of the Kojo, but also for TCGs, the fun thing, and as a competitive player for me, is theory crafting. That's what I was known for in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's what I was known for in Magic the Gathering. So obviously, it's going to carry over into everything else I do, including my other hobbies. So giving me this challenge of like, oh, Kojo's not really making top 8s. I'm like, well, I see the mechanics behind it, and I think it's there. It's just missing a couple jigsaw pieces to make it really, really good. So I'm hoping that Problem Prop really gives us those tools of the jigsaw pieces we really need in red. It's almost in its entirety, with some rare occasions, right? To be able to be like, oh, it's making top 8s now. Or when it's in the hands of TCG players, it's consistently making top 8s now, right? A good TCG should really have, when you go to the top 8, 4+ different decks inside of that top 8. Yes, I understand like the doom days of the beginning of Altered. It was top 8 is 8 copies of Word. Enjoy, right? And they understand that that is a problem, right? But we also shouldn't be going from that to Trist. Like that doesn't solve anything. It's still the same deck in the top 8. We should really have 3 or 4 smatterings of something different within our top 8s. And I really got to applaud for really being like, hey, that needs to be a thing as well that we focus on.
Thank you both for joining me for this great conversation. Is there anything or anyone you want to shout out before we close out?
Yeah, I want to shout out Paul Butler and the staff at Games and Stuff, which is our friendly local game store. They embraced Altered from the beginning. They were part of the Kickstarter campaign, and they have worked with us to make sure that Altered is a premier event that they host. Without them, I feel like the success that Chris and I enjoyed, that you've enjoyed, and that of the top 4 of the 2v2 event, 3 of the teams were from the same store, and we're all friends, and we've all played together for a while now. So it's been a really great community, and I guess that would be my second shout out, is to the Altered community as a whole, because it was a really special event, and everybody that was a part of it really had a positive attitude and were there to play competitively and have good games, but also to enjoy themselves. And we didn't encounter a single person who was particularly sour or not there to enjoy themselves. So thank everyone who has been a part of PAX 2v2, and we hope there's more in the future.
God, I have to go after that? Why? No, this hurts. That's so good. Yeah, I guess really quickly, just to chime off the community at large, I've never played a game where I'm losing terribly and I'm still having fun. Like, I know I'm going to lose. I am basically kidnapped for the next 3 turns. There's nothing I can do. And instead of scooping it up, I'm like, no, we're playing this out. I'm having fun. And I have never played a game like that in my time. The people who came out, the PAX, came by, say hi, played with us, all of our 2v2 events, everyone was super fun to play with. It was the best competitive event I have played in my entire TCG career. 100%. There is no question. Going a little bit more narrow, our community, locals, GNS, Paul, all the people that played tested with us, all the people after the event that said hi to me on Discord, lighted me up, tagged me in things, and of course to do and you, dear viewer, for watching, right? It's corny as hell, but really, people who make the game have been so kind and so nice. That's why I will be here for a very long time.
And I think that's a great place to end this. We've talked about how much we love the game and how much we've seen other people love the game. And I feel like if there's anything from what we're hoping for from 2025, Equinox, it's to let us play this game we love and let us play it more often. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. See you again soon. Bye.
Go play more Altered! Go play more Altered! Go play more!